When the ANC sneezes, South Africa catches a cold, so say many observers, after South Africa's markets and the currency fell on news that President Cyril Ramaphosa was likely to resign after the scathing Section 89 panel report, which found that he may have violated the Constitution. Now, the president is unlikely to be held accountable by Parliament if the decision of the ANC NEC for its MPs to reject the panel report is anything to go by, and that is the essence of our conversation tonight. Good evening and welcome to Unfiltered. I'm Onati Batyasha, standing in for Aldrian Sumpia. Well, the conflation of the state and the party enabled by South Africa's proportional representation electoral system has meant that the internal ANC politics of wrangling for power, patronage, corruption and cadre deployment, among others, continue to affect the country's progress and its development, with the impact being felt by all, especially ordinary people who continue to endure unemployment and poor service delivery. As the ANC is about to start its 55th national conference this week, where new leadership will be chosen and policies likely to affect the country will be adopted, we are asking the question, is the ANC holding South Africa to ransom? Remember, you can join in this conversation by using our Twitter handle at Unfiltered SABC and Facebook Unfiltered SABC. Joining us for this discussion, I'm joined in studio by Dr. Alex Mashilo, and he is the SACP spokesperson. And I'm also joined via Zoom by Dr. Sunuki Zikalala, and of course, he is the ANC Veterans Task Team. Thank you so much, gentlemen, to both of you for joining me today. I think I want to start with you, Dr. Mashilo, because you are in studio with me. So I'm going to actually throw back that question that we are asking our viewers today. In light of all that has transpired, in the running up to the 55th ANC National Conference, with all of the infighting that we've been seeing, all of the divisions within the party, is the party holding us to ransom, particularly as you look at the Section 89 report that is very damning against President Cyril Ramaphosa?
Thank you very much, and greetings to Dr. Zikalala. Let me say South Africa is a multi-party democracy. That is in our constitution. We all have democratic rights, and these are recognized in the Bill of Rights. It will be incorrect, while we have our own agency, to blame other people and to even go to the extent that they are holding us to ransom, while we ourselves have our own agency. The most important question is, what do we do ourselves as South Africans so that we take responsibility? We do not speak from the standpoint of external locus of control as if we are powerless ourselves.
And I'm going to get to the solutions, but essentially, if you recall, what transpired leading up to that report being released, and then it was eventually released by that three-man panel, and then there were concerns and uncertainties about, will the president actually resign? And in fact, we heard of secret meetings being held. The country was, to put it mildly, very much divided. I mean, we saw, as an example, just how the markets were affected. The bank's shares fell 8%, the rand fell more than 4%. I understand you want to hold South Africans accountable to a level, to some extent, but surely these developments were concerning.
Yeah, those were South African developments, and I must emphasize that we all have that agency. We are here. We have the political rights enshrined in our constitution, and we have a role to play. So before we can ask the questions about others, we must pose those questions about ourselves. What do we as South Africans do under the circumstance? What are we doing better for our own country before we can outsource? Or in fact, to start with, is it a good idea to outsource responsibility while we are alive ourselves?
All right, Dr. Zikalala, I'm going to bring you into the conversation yourself, in our quest then to start unearthing the problems that are currently being faced by the ANC and asking, South Africans that all-important question, is the ANC holding South Africa ransom? You know, Dr. Zikalala, you yourself, as a long-standing senior member of the party, you've said, you know, that MPs tomorrow, if they don't support essentially what the NEC's decision that Ramaphosa take the Section 89 report into review, it will bring some level of uncertainty to the country. So you then start to see and draw a line that what the party does internally does have consequences for the country.
Yeah, well, good evening to Dr. Alex Mashilo, and good evening to you, Nati, and your viewers. The African National Congress is not holding South African society to ransom. It is a fact that, and it's a plea that we've made, especially to parliamentarians, that they should bring about certainty in society. And of course, as you know, as Mashilo said, the markets plunged a little bit, but of course the country was on tenterhooks. But it is bound to happen because the ANC, it is a governing party. And when the ANC sneezes, some people catch a cold. And so it was unfortunate that this happened. And we as the Veterans League, we fully support the president's, the president taking the panel review, the panel on review, because it's important that should happen. Because if you look at the panel itself, it gave inconclusive answers. Everything that they mentioned, saying that the president has violated the Constitution itself 5 times, it was he may have, and they had no powers at all to investigate. Everything that they dealt with, it was based on newspaper clippings, it was based on anecdotes by individuals who came and gave evidence. And so we know very well that National Prosecuting Authority and the Hawks are investigating the matter. And so it's important that the president, as a citizen of the country, he has the right to take the matter on review. And then based on the outcome of that matter, it is then that society will be able to know what is the fate of our president and the fate of the country itself. And so we're not holding the country to ransom. The president has got those rights. He is an individual, he's a citizen. We have a Bill of Rights in the country. He has the right to take the matter on review. And that is why we as the African National Congress, we are appealing to our parliamentarians that sanity must prevail, number one. That secondly, that they should vote with what the party is saying, because the party is not saying we're not holding the president unaccountable. We'll hold the president accountable. No one is above the law in this country. Our constitution states it very clear. No one is above the law. And so the president, if he has violated our constitution, he has been found to have violated the foreign exchange regulations, of course he has to face the might of the law. There's no one who's above the law in this country. And so we are saying that we are not holding the country to ransom. We just want to see justice being done in the country itself.
Let's look at the developments that are going to be happening tomorrow. Of course, we know that all-important parliamentary sitting where MPs will then deliberate and, of course, vote on the Pala matter. Talk to me about the impact, of that NEC decision on the South African constitutional democracy, of course, instructing MPs not to live up to their oath, essentially to protect South Africa and its constitution when it comes to voting. Your thoughts on that?
No, we said the parliamentarians must take South Africa's interest at heart, not individual interest. And so what we are saying as the African National Congress, all MPs who are there, they can tell us that they're going to vote on their conscience, but they must vote knowing very well that they should take South Africa's interest at heart. What is South Africa's interest at heart is to make sure that the rule of law apply to everybody in the country, that the president must be given the opportunity to take the matter on review. And number 3 is that the president must be held accountable. That's all that we are saying. And so if the party says that this is how we should treat this matter, I don't think that we should say that, no, I as an individual, I'm going to vote differently. We are saying that's why we're appealing to them, that we should bring about certainty in the country. We should make sure that every citizen of this country is protected by the South African Constitution. And so the Constitution does protect the president, to say that the president has the right to take this matter on review. There's nothing wrong with that. And so that is why we as members of the Veterans League, we support that wholeheartedly. And we know that there are investigations going on. And if the president is found wanting, and he himself had said it many times, if he's been criminally charged and found wanting, he'll step aside. He never said that I will violate the law, I'll call the army to protect me. He's never said that. He says, I will comply with the ANC's processes, saying that whoever has been charged criminally will step down. That's what he says. And so we are saying that to parliamentarians, let's make sure that we bring certainty into the country and make sure that we support the president taking the matter on review.
All right, I'd like us to pause, and of course, after this very short break, we'll then look at how all of this is having an impact on South Africa, and also just to see what agency then South Africans have in as far as this question that we are asking you tonight: is the ANC holding South Africa to ransom? Of course, this is all leading up to that 55th National Conference of the ANC happening this weekend. Unfiltered takes a quick break. We'll be back short after this. Stay with us. Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. We are watching Unfiltered with me, Unathi Patyashe. Let's remind you of our conversation this evening. The conflation of the state and the party enabled by South Africa's proportional representation electoral system has meant that the internal ANC politics of wrangling for power, patronage, corruption and cadre deployment, among others, continue to affect the country's progress and its development, with the impact being felt by all, especially the ordinary people who continue to endure unemployment and poor service delivery. So before we went on to break, I have been in conversation with my panel. Of course, we've got Dr. Zikalala, who's joining us on Zoom, and then Dr. Mashilo, who is from the SACP. I'm very happy to say we are now joined in studio by Mr. Zolani Mkiva, and he's the General Secretary of Congress of Traditional Leaders of South Africa. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. But let me start here with you, Mr. Mkiva, because I've gotten, just some of our panels already speaking to us about various factors. When we ask that question about responsibility as it relates to your constituency, when you look at the happenings within the ANC, I mean, what responsibility do you have to ensure that with your allegiance and your alliance with the ANC, they are somehow held accountable because of some of the effects of the internal politics on the South African public as a whole?
Well, thank you very much, Unathi, for inviting us to be part of this conversation at this critical juncture. Firstly, the institution of traditional leadership has a key role to play in the management of the national question. Mm-hmm. And therefore the responsibility of that management of the national question does not only preside with the ANC on its own. It can't do that isolated. All the motive forces in the country ought to come together. But the ANC is at the center of this, and we have to give it all the necessary constructive support in order for it to realize what is expected by the electorate, by the citizens of this country. For me, I think this is the 28th year since the attainment of democracy in South Africa. There has been a tremendous shift from where we come from, where our people were dehumanized, to where we are today. So there's a lot of good work that has happened. But of course, there are wrong things which we can see that are happening. So we don't keep quiet. We interact with the ANC from time to time. We're not part of the alliance, as it were, but we have got a very good historic and friendship relationship with the ANC, which dates back from the time of the liberation struggle. So at all material times, as the national officials of Contralesa, we meet with the national officials of the ANC, and sometimes we are compelled by circumstances to reprimand them when we can see that sometimes they fight in public, and we see those fights as petty political fights and squabbles. And we say you need to unite and focus on what you are expected to do.
But they are having an effect on your constituency. I mean, let's look at what happened earlier with the KZN Controlesa as an example, saying that, they've threatened to create its own parallel government, and at the center of those grievances was that the ANC-led government was not engaging them on critical issues. Those are some of the things that Controlesa members have said, for instance. This was in July 2022. And again, references of, just some of the factionalism that happens within the party has caused some grave incidences in this country, to name but a few. We can even go to the July unrest as an example. So these are pertinent issues that are being raised by people on the ground to say, where there is infighting within this party, we do not necessarily see the work that needs to be done at grassroots level.
Well, there's an old saying that when two great elephants are fighting, the grass suffers. So there's a truth in that statement that if leaders are at each other's throats, obviously the programs and projects that are expected to be executed are going to end up being affected. And those programs are intended to better the lives of the people. And if we don't put the hands on the deck and we're busy fighting for positions, we're busy focused in romanticizing, positions and patronage and all of those things, then obviously there's not going to be progress. Those complaints are genuine complaints, and that's why that we ought to talk to the leadership and say they must not focus to themselves. Leadership is about focusing on people first and foremost. Your own needs and your own benefits must be something that must be in the tail end of your priorities. When we talk leadership, we're not talking leadership, where people want to be dealers instead of being leaders. So that's why, as Controlesa, we always take a view of saying that if leaders are doing what they do by fighting each other, then they are committing a suicide, and that suicide will sink the ANC. And the ANC is a national asset, and it doesn't belong to them as leaders. It is an asset of the nation.
Let me bring in Dr. Mashilo there, just based on what has already been said, and also just looking at some of the issues raised about leadership that has, in a way, put us in a quagmire, so to say, particularly as it affects working class. You've, mentioned yourself as a vanguard of the working class. You've also made some utterances that you could be, in fact, standing for election in 2024. These utterances were made because of some of the things that you are seeing that are going wrong within the tripartite alliance, particularly as it relates to the ANC.
Look, I want to give you an assignment, and I hope that South Africans are watching this show, viewing it from where they are viewing. There is a general decomposition of unity in South Africa. Whether you talk about churches, whether you talk about opposition parties, whether you talk about trade unions, whether you talk about the ANC today, whether you talk about institutions such as the SABC. So what is important when you look at this, for example, you take the ANC as your unit of analysis, it is important you don't do so in isolation from the general decomposition of unity that is going on. Whether you talk about the institution of traditional leadership, our leaders from Controlesa will tell you there are people who say, this is not the chief, I'm the chief. This is not the king, I am the king. So what is important is to look at what are the underlying factors. What is the economic basis? What is the political economy of all these things that is unfolding? And what action do we take by coming together and say this is the direction? I must say the following about what you have mentioned on the SACP and the question of electoral contest. This is not an opportunist resolution. On it, there is no date, there is no 2024. That date comes from elsewhere. It does not come from our resolution. And it is a matter of principle. If you look at political parties in South Africa, they do exercise their independence. And in so doing, they look at their electoral strategies and tactics. Others stand for elections. Others choose the alliance road, like like we ourselves have chosen. What we do every 5 years is to assess the efficacy of the approach we have chosen. I must say this is not a threat. It is a principled consideration that goes far beyond what is happening in the ANC. It is motivated by what is happening in South Africa. We held a central committee meeting 2 weeks ago. We received a document that looks at the issues of renewal and unity of the ANC, the reconfiguration of the alliance, and the electoral modalities. We will be holding a special central committee in January, between January and March, where we will finalize our approach. But as we talk about the ANC, we do so from a principled position, and we do so from the bottom of our hearts, wishing them to unite and to solve the problems facing the South African people.
Dr. Mashilo, let's leave it there for now. So we take a quick break. I'll be back straight after this. Joining me is Dr. Alex Mashilo, National Spokesperson for the SACP, as well as Dr. Snuki Zikalala, who is joining us via Zoom, and Mr. Zolani Mkiva from Controlesa. And of course, we will hear some final inputs from the panel, particularly coming back to Dr. Zikalala. Stay with us. Welcome back to Unfiltered. Well, as the ANC is about to embark on its 55th national conference this week, where new leadership will be chosen and policies likely to affect the country will be adopted, we ask the question, is the ANC holding South Africa at ransom? My panel tonight, Dr. Alex Mashilo, Dr. Snuki Zikalala, as well as Mr. Zolani Mkiva. Dr. Zikalala, I'm going to bring you into this as we wrap up our conversation. Again, it is critical just listening to some of the thoughts by our panelists to ask that all-important question, how can we make sure that a situation that happens internally from a political standpoint within the ANC does not negatively affect South Africa?
Well, I think it won't affect the country negatively if anything happens to South Africa. As you know, we're a solid democracy. We've been in a democratic country for almost 28 years. And we have a very strong constitution in the country. We know what will happen if the president resigns and how the party will handle the matter. But we are confident that we are still steering the ship, and that the captain is still on board. And in as far as we're concerned, is that it's true that these allegations, they do hamper economic development of the country. They do hamper the issue of unemployment. They do hamper the issue of dealing decisively with what is happening in Eskom. As you know, I'm sitting in the dark now for the past
We're also
2
sitting
hours.
in the dark. Dr. Zikalala, I'm going to have to move on, unfortunately. We are running out of time. Mr. Kiva, very, very quickly, your last thoughts about how the ANC policies are likely to affect the country, both negatively or positively?
Well, the ANC policies are progressive policies, and we wish that at all material times they affect the country positively. And we want to take this opportunity to say we wish that the members and the leaders of the ANC must unite behind the program, and they must know consciously take a conscious decision that our liberation has not been achieved in totality, and therefore there's still a task in hand.
Dr. Mashilo, your final words, particularly looking at your constituency.
Our message to the delegates going to the 55th National Conference of the ANC is that they must push for a policy change. This is because the lowest unemployment rate in South Africa was 16.5% in 1995. In 1996, after the government adopted GEAR, unemployment shot up to crisis high levels of above 20%. Since that time, it has been worsening above 20% until today. That cannot be a good policy direction.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this evening. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time. Dr. Alex Mashilo, Dr. Snuki Zikalala on Zoom, and Mr. Zolani Mkiva right here on studio. Thank you so much. This was Unfiltered with me, Onati Bagyasha. Until next time, thank you so much for watching.